Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on Decentralized Digital Identity in the Metaverse under eIDAS 2. My name is Julián Valero. I'm a professor of administrative law at the University of Murcia, where I also lead the Cátedra Fundación Chair on Identity and Digital Rights. We are collaborating in this event organized by the Academic Chair for the Responsible Development of the Metaverse at the University of Alicante. This is the second of the two activities that the chair is dedicating to this topic of digital identity. Last week, the European Council and the Parliament reached a provisional political agreement on the core elements of a new framework for European digital identity. The revision of the eIDAS 1 regulation will define the legal and the technical framework for decentralized digital identity and trusted services. So every member state will have the obligation to provide its citizens and its legal entities with a digital wallet that will contain not only their personal identification, but their attestation of attributes as well. So in a metaverse scenario, any action or any decision adopted by an avatar may be attributed to a legal or a physical person identified with this wallet. So this will be the subject of the presentation to be given by Steffen SCHWALM. Steffen is Senior Manager, Digital Identity and Trust at MSG. Thank you very much, Steffen, for your availability. This is the second time that I moderate a webinar with your participation. I think that the last time was in October 21, something like that. But I hope the third time will be a face-to-face event. So a first version of the paper that Steffen is writing on this topic will be discussed by Monica Palmirani, who is full professor of legal informatics at the University of Bologna in Italy, and Ignacio Alamillo. Nacho is advisor at Logalty and is a member of our research group IRTech on innovation, law and technology at the University of Murcia. So once Nacho and Monica have concluded, Steffen will be able to address their remarks. After all, questions for the audience can be raised via chat, and I will take them to the speaker and the discussants. So, Steffen, thank you very much again, and the floor is yours. I guess that we cannot hear you. You have to open your mic. Okay.
Yeah, it is. It's always the same issue. So thanks a lot for this chance to present the current results of the current status of my paper on the subject eIDAS and the Metaverse. I just jump to my slides. So decentralized digital identity in the Metaverse under eIDAS 2. We will start a bit with the decentralized identity management and its current limitations. Something about eIDAS 2 that everybody's on the same page. Then some ideas on how we can or how we may solve this identity issue, which Julián just mentioned concerning the Metaverse with eIDAS 2 and with the tools of eIDAS 2, and then some outlook on the maybe further research before Monica and Nacho then may give their questions, remarks, and we can start with the discussion. Some dimensions of digital identities. It's only an example. It's not the aim that this picture fulfills every possible dimension on the word identity. If you want to go further, I just recommend the paper from Delta Freeline, in this case from 2008. Basically, identity can be, it's my legal me. It could be also, it's my private me. So legal could be my eID. My private me could be, for example, my Google identity, which is on lower level and may not clearly or legally compliant identify myself. Related to my identity, it's maybe also my diploma, could be also my company and what I'm allowed to do for this company. But it also could be my virtual me, like my avatar. or my virtual car, which I may have in Second Life, for example. Or it could be my signature, something I sign. And the question is, how do we fulfill these dimensions in the real world and in the virtual world? What are the limitations a bit on eIDAS 1? Some limitations, one limitation was that the eIDAS 1 focused on the core identity for national entities, so name, address, etc. But as shown before, a digital identity is much more than only the natural entity. So name, family name, address, birthday, etc. It's also what I'm allowed to do for a company, for example. What we also had were the limitations on certifications of level of assurances, because some countries we had the certifications, in other countries we didn't have those certifications, and the certifications were not accepted between the member states, only the notifications. The other subject is a bit maybe a typical German one, the disproportion of security and usability, which led to limited utilization. I always mention it with the sentence, in Germany, we eliminated the biggest security risk, which is the user, which might not be the best approach to solve this identity subject in digital transactions. Heterogeneous requirements on trust services led to competitive disadvantages for vendors. So we had 150%, for example, in Germany, and lower requirements in other member states. But on the other hand, European standards supported interoperability, so I can check a signature from legality also in Germany and a signature from Trust by legality. The trust list supported the transparency. We had a clear list who is QTSB and who is not. So some advantages, some disadvantages, which may have led to the requirement, okay, we need an improvement in this subject. The other one is that, on the other hand, you can say the well-known SSI burden came up with the aim to give the user its sovereignty on its data. But as a security and compliance expert, I have to say, if there's no trusted third party issuing or verifying an identity, credentials or wallet, where should the legal trust come from? What makes the identity trustworthy? That it's really Ignacio Alamillo and not my neighbor trying to be Ignacio Alamillo. How do I know it if this identity is not issued by a trusted third party on a defined and certified way? If the wallet is not provided by a trusted third party, if it's not certified and we have proven security in the subject. So those issues should be solved by eIDAS 2 by combining the advantages from eIDAS 1 and the advantages from the SSI approach in a legal and trustworthy, legally compliant and trustworthy manner. The other subject, decentralized identity management, was mostly built on DLT, but we have to say a little bit that DLT currently lacks a little bit of some subjects we need for trustworthy or for trustworthy digital transactions, high regulated environments where we have burden of proof and documentation requirements, which require the authenticity, so non-repudiation of the creator of a document or the identity of somebody. For this, I need an eID, I need an identity issued by a government, for example, in a trustworthy manner, or a signature from a QTSB in this case. The reliability, so I have to make the process evident against third party. The confidentiality, which means also at the end of the day, the GDPR compliance, meaning we have to be able to delete data, we have to be able to transfer data, and we have to make this evident, authenticity, integrity, etc., not by showing the system itself, but a little bit by sending it to a judge or an auditor. It's not possible to send anything in a standardized way from a DLT. Currently, it's not possible to delete anything in DLT, or it's not a standard. There's not a standard for deletion. And without adding QTSPs to DLT, it might be difficult to come to a signature. Means using DLT without doing anything won't really solve our issues in these subjects. Let's jump to eIDAS 2. So discussing about advantages and disadvantages about current solutions. Now just look how eIDAS 2 may solve those issues. As Julian just mentioned, we had in the eIDAS 2, we have the requirement that a member state has to provide an EU digital wallet to its citizens and companies by law. So which means it can be issued by the member state itself under authority of the member state or recognized, which means it could be a private one certified by the member state. And we have a dedicated obligation for acceptance by public, by critical infrastructure, but also by GAFA, so the big market-leading platform providers. On the other hand, the member state has the obligation for notification of an eID scheme within 12 months. So it's not only they can do it like in the eIDAS 1, it's an obligation they have to do it. And we have the possible certification of private eID schemes, and this has to be accepted in Europe. So we means the wallet based on European standards is mentioned. So the we have implementing acts should have to be established within 5 or better 6 months after eIDAS is published, and then reference to European standards means get wallets which with proven security in the subject, and we get eID schemes notified. The wallet has to have an PID, which is nothing more than less than this eID scheme, and we solve the issue with the private eID schemes with this certification, which has to be accepted in Europe. On the other hand, some changes on QTSPs. The most important ones here are the qualified attestation of attributes. In eIDAS, in SSI language, it would be verified credentials in this case. So we open the identity subject not to attributes like power of attorney, like my diploma or something else, which means it's much more possible than only the core identity like done in the eIDAS 1 approach. The other subject is that we have a QTSP on electronic ledger, and thanks Julian for mentioning this news from the Parliament, because at this version section 11 is again included. So we will have the QTSP for electronic ledger in this case. Means we may solve the issues raised on DLT and the subjects on eIDAS 1, the limitations on eIDAS 1 with the new eIDAS 2. Something about the trust model. Many of you may know this picture. I used it also for the eIDAS 1. Now I added the eIDAS 2 subjects. And what we have to say is that we can say that the SSI word, meaning wallets, verified credentials, etc., are included in the trust model of eIDAS. This means the wallet will be issued by a member state, which accepts or be the digital wallet provider. The wallet will be certified by a conformity assessment body, which is accredited by an accreditation body and under supervision of a national supervisory body. So we always have, you can say, this trust chain of a trustworthy third party issuing something which is certified by somebody. Certification can be proved via a court at the end of the day or via the supervisory bodies, and based on standards which are given by the toolbox states, but also in close collaboration with the standardization bodies with dedicated process on how we come to those standards. Means decentralized identity management integrated in the existing trust model of trustworthy third parties. How do we execute those subjects? It's also something which, in my opinion, was a good decision by the Commission. Not only here's the regulation and maybe the standards, just look how to implement, but to say, okay, I just launched something, large-scale pilots, which have the dedicated obligation just to implement pilot solutions to test the regulation, to test what's the technical requirements given by the toolbox. Is it really feasible? What may have to be changed? Which technical approach is feasible, and which technical approach might have been a good idea but not workable? And in parallel, to have a reference implementation just to see how the EU digital wallet may work, how do we, which protocols do we use with which interfaces, etc. And to integrate this a little bit in this circular, to have close collaboration of all parties, and in the large-scale pilots, the four ones, so Potential led by France and Germany, Nobit as a Nordic consortium, DC4U led by Spain in this case, and EWC led by Sweden and Finland, always focusing on dedicated use cases in EVC, for example, payment and digital travel. On the technology is defined in the architecture reference framework published by the Toolbox, which I'm pretty sure the audience may know, where we define how to key management should work, where the issuance protocol, the verification protocol is is based on OID for verifiable credentials, or MDoc, ISO, MDL, and the data model for the credentials is in this case W3C or ISO MDL. But what I want to say is a bit that there's no precondition on the verifiable data registry or infrastructure. So it could be DLT, it also could be existing PKI. This is something which is really remarkable here, that we are open in this subject. This means, just to summarize, I think the picture on the right-hand side is known by everybody, this triangular on holder, issue, and verifier. But as you can see, we just added some subjects, which are added by eIDAS 2. So the holder will get a wallet with proven security, because proven against the standards given by the toolbox, proven by conformity assessment body, that really have a secure wallet in this subject. On the other hand, the issuing of PID certified, or it's issued by the member state, in this case in a secure manner. A qualified attestation, trust service provider for qualified attestation of attributes. I have a certified QTSP, and I can be sure it's really the QTSP, and I have a secure way how to issue the attestation in the wallet. And on the other hand, the relying party, which has to have to be registered according to the last version of the eIDAS 2, and I can really be sure it's really the verifier and not somebody who seems to be the verifier in this subject, which means we integrate security and proven trust in this triangular, and just solve those issues from the existing SSI approach, which may give the user the data sovereignty, but how can I have data sovereignty if I don't know if my wallet is secure and if the issuer is really the issuer? It seems to be. So only with proven security I will achieve those legal trust and data sovereignty in this case. So you can say eIDAS 2 enables SSI in the subject and may solve the open subjects from eIDAS 1. A little bit deeper in the technical subject about the qualified attestation, as mentioned, the data model W3C, as we know from the SSI world, and ISO MDL, the format SDJ for the individual selective disclosure, or CBOR as the format for MDoc, and here the signature formats with the relevant data given here. So for those ones knowing X509 may remember, it's a bit similar but transferred in the new technology in this subject. Yes, I know there are discussions on the format and the interoperability, and the formats of W3C and SCJ are ongoing, but this is not the subject for today. It's only just to show that the technical framework is ongoing, and we may solve the issue to have a dedicated technical framework for the EU digital wallet, and qualified attestation of attributes, but also for the verifiers, etc. Some limitation and chances of the decentralization within eIDAS too, because we speak about decentralized identity management, as you may remember. On the EU digital wallet, we will have this trustworthy third party, so there is an intermediary, which means the member state or the institution on behalf of the member state, which issues the digital wallet, and the PID given by the member state. Yes, we have a centralized authority, but the centralized authority ensures the security and the trustworthiness of wallet and PID. For qualified attestation of attributes, is the same. I have a QTSP, yes, but on the other hand, I can be sure it's legally compliant. It's really the attestation it seems to be, and I have a QTSP which is liable for what the QTSP is doing, and proven security due to the certification by the CAP. Same for the relying parties. At the end of the day, I need somebody who accepts my wallet. So without it, might not be workable, but to ensure it's really the relying party it seems to be, it might be helpful to have a list of them. So means trustworthy or legally compliant decentralized identity management without any intermediary might remain a dream. And it won't be implemented in Europe. This is the background. Now let's go how it relates to eIDAS, how eIDAS 2 relates to the Metaverse, and some thesis for trustworthy virtual reality from my side. So the Metaverse enables the user to take part in virtual reality, but how can we ensure a legally binding transaction if it's unclear if the acting entities and objects are real? How do I know if the avatar is really Ignacio or somebody else? So just to break down the Metaverse a bit, you can say we have these categories given here. It's a possible categorization. I know there's also other categorizations possible, so it's only one possibility given here. First of all, a virtual or augmented reality, which means so Second Life or similar, or avatars or other virtual equivalents. Digital twin, this could be a real machine or a virtual machine. So for example, my car in Second Life, it would be a digital twin, but it's a virtual one. And tokenization, so virtual real value and equivalent of assets. So it could be also my virtual Picasso in Second Life, for example. But the question is a bit how to match a legal identity with a virtual equivalent or with a virtual equivalent. So how do I know that this avatar is really this natural person, or that this avatar relates to a company in this case, and which person is then allowed to act for this company? How do we ensure a bit, the challenge is a bit this privacy-friendly match between virtual and legal identity? Do I have to provide always the whole identity to make this clear, or only some parts? But also a trustworthy DLT infrastructure for tokenization, because to be mainly done on DLT, including the traceability, but also just in case the evidence, if, for example, I don't pay for the token for my virtual Picasso, for example. Some dimensions of Metaverse, I know there's always also a discussion about the differentiation between Metaverse and Web3. So in my opinion, the dimensions may eliminate the borders between Web3 and Metaverse. So first of all, virtual reality, which could be, for example, an avatar in Second Life or similar, an augmented reality, which could be an avatar, but I only use some virtual glasses, so I'm still in the reality. A digital twin, like mentioned, so my Rolls-Royce on my Ferrari in my virtual life, or a tokenization, so like I mentioned, it could be my Picasso in the virtual reality, but the Picasso, which is in the virtual reality, bought by my virtual company, and maybe by my virtual deputy. And now I want to make clear that Steffen has to pay. Some technical challenges we may have in this subject. So we currently don't have this trustworthy unique identification in the metaverse itself. So we may have a self-issued ID based on the used environment, but this is like said, it's proprietary. And how do I know that this is really the person it seems to be? So the question is a bit open. How do we integrate the wallets from eIDAS 2 with the metaverse in the subject? Security and privacy, the platforms are mostly provided by dominant platform providers, which are mostly not European. And you may know we don't have we don't have privacy shields, so how to enter those subjects. So on proof of security, and also the infrastructure, as I mentioned, tokenization mainly done on DLT, and we have some security subjects, but also long-term verifiability subjects, etc. So CSS1, eIDAS 2 enables trustworthy and legally binding transactions in the metaverse. How may we do this? We have the PID within the judicial wallet. We have the virtual equivalent. This could be in QA, so a qualified attestation of attributes issued to myself, for example. Then match the virtual equivalent to the natural legal entity. Could be the identification done by the identification of the natural legal entity, and issue a QA, and then proof present the wallet and proof by the relying parties. I can use the wallet also with my avatar, but using the two-factor authentication, in this case, present and then proof by the relying party, and the same I could do with present wallet sign and authenticate. And I can do this with the wallet, with the avatar, if the avatar is, for example, issued as an attestation to myself. But yes, some open question mentioned here may remain open, especially maybe cloud wallet for legal entities and product pass if we speak about a virtual reality for a company, for example, this in the subject, if my virtual Picasso is sold to me by a company, for example. Or also the identification of virtual issuers and relying parties, because also the QTSP might have an avatar in the virtual reality, and the same for the relying party. And then how to combine everything. eIDAS 2 will ensures privacy and data sovereignty in Metaverse, because eIDAS 2 requires selective disclosure. It means I don't have to provide a whole identity. It's maybe only it's this avatar, and they accept the avatar, or it's only necessary the yes or no in this subject. QTSP for Ledger will ensure the security for the decentralized infrastructure and tokenization. I have a technology, like said, selective disclosure and zero knowledge proof are included currently, or ideas how to include it. And the user decides about sharing. So we have this proven and tested by large-scale pilots, but it might be a question if it might be helpful to integrate the metaverse subject in some of the large-scale pilots too. CSS 3, eIDAS 2 ensures proven security in the metaverse. So the left-hand side you already know from the limitations on decentralization. But eIDAS 2 may match the legal entity with a virtual equivalent, because the equivalent is nothing more, nothing less than an attestation. The same for the virtual or real machine to a legal natural entity, because the machine at the end of the day is an attestation, an attribute to this legal or natural entity. And in this case, I can do this legally binding transactions only during the proof. I have to do the translation between avatar and real identity. It could make the authenticity and integrity provable by using signatures and seals. Only have to be possible to mention, for example, only the avatar and the certificate of the signature, and this translation during the proof in a privacy-friendly manner that maybe if possible only the avatar in the first case is mentioned, and only if I'm allowed to get the whole identity I get that really Steffen or somebody else just signed. Avoids disclosure of all PII due to privacy by design. Like I said, this disclosure is possible and required by law, and we will ensure this trustworthy IT infrastructure for tokenization as long as it's provided by QTSP for electronic ledger, and the traceability subjects are currently defined and standardized, for example, by the project Trace4You, which is one of the eBSI implementation project, but also by, for example, Vector working on EPSI. So on the tokenization subject, if the nodes are provided by member states, this is done by EPSI. By EPSI, we have the governmental trust anchor. It will be already integrated in eIDAS 2 because we have DC4U as the large-scale pilot. We have eBSI, ongoing eBSI project, but we need to supplement tokenization including linkage with digital wallet. It is an open subject which should be clarified by one of those projects, and the same on the traceability. This could be done by the mentioned projects like Vector Trace4You, where MSG is taking part. So we will have this infrastructure. What we only have to do, match it with the Metaverse in this subject. An outlook. This picture you may know from the beginning. So eIDAS 2 can ensure legal trust and proven security to achieve trustworthy real and virtual identity or reality. And like I said, everything can be covered by eIDAS 2. So the PID, it's the legal me, the signature, it's my signature. What I'm allowed to do is a QA, and my virtual me, the diploma, and so on, can be also solved by the QA. So long story short, eIDAS 2 may solve the issues which we have in the Metaverse, but yeah, it's not solved now. We have to do some work in this subject. So we should combine the EU digital wallet with Metaverse applications, move PID and QA within the Metaverse, so to solve the subject, the translation from avatar to real identity, interoperability of AIF with Metaverse technology, but on the other hand, also the cloud wallet subject for enterprise authentication, especially in case of digital twin, to enable eBSI for the tokenization subject, where we need also, I think, pretty sure more further standardization and security on security in TLT, but also to have maybe NFT as a QA or similar to be issued in EU digital wallet. This is maybe an open question. And the open question from the other side, what is the authentic source for virtual identity? What's the authentic source for the avatar? What's the authentic source for the avatar for a project QTSP? For commercial registry, we all know it. For the avatars, don't know. It might be something that is something for certification, or not certification, but further research. But in the next step for the certification, but also the certification requirements for example, virtual QTSPs or issuer certificates to virtual identity. So long story short, eIDAS 2 may solve those issues. eIDAS 2 provides the tools and the legal and technical framework for it, but we still have some steps to go. And I hope that with my paper, I can give some ideas, some recommendations for further research, which we can then do and I can execute in some of the projects I mentioned or beyond. So thanks a lot for the possibility to present. And if you have any questions, just reach out to me. And I give the ball back to Ignacio. Just stop my presentation.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Steffen. Briefly summarizing the thesis you have exposed, I could say that eIDAS 2 may enhance trust and legal certainty in the context of the metaverse, but you have finished saying that further research is still needed. I guess that legal research as well. So it's the time for Nacho and Monica to answer the question you have posed. Nacho, we will start the discussion of Steffen Perver with your remarks, please. The floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to act as a discussion with Steffen SCHWALM. We've been a long time discussing among ourselves regarding these issues, and it is always a pleasure. So I completely concur with Professor Valero's suggestion to meet in the future in face-to-face meetings, and hopefully the eIDAS 2 proposal will give us some opportunities in here. Okay, coming back to the issue of the paper, I've of course gone through it, and I believe that your paper offers a very good analysis of the issues and limitations of the eIDAS 1 to start with. Probably I missed. I think it would be interesting to stress some of them, because some of the problems that really have hindered the adoption of the proposed identity federation in the European Union include things like quite political, not technical. For instance, in eIDAS 1, as you perfectly know, member states were not mandated to introduce any kind of eID, so there were member states that could do nothing at all. And of course, this was a real problem. Member states that actually have introduced electronic ID means, such as Spain, have decided to not notify them. For instance, in Spain, we all have used extensively systems like Clave, which is used, provided by the central government, and is used everywhere in Spain, or we use some regional systems similar to Clave that are multi-factor-based authentication systems, very, very highly deployed. But because these systems have not been notified, we cannot use them outside Spain. This is a quite important issue, and it is not a technical issue because it is just political one. So nothing prevented the Spanish government to notify Clave if they wanted Spanish citizens to be able to use this in other spaces. And finally, one of the big problems is the fact that the eIDAS 1 that didn't mandate member states to allow using eIDs to private parties. So when you wanted to open a bank account, depending on the member state, you would have the possibility of using your eID to do so or not. And this has generated a lot of problems, especially when it comes to AML, as you know. So perhaps in the paper it would be interesting to stress the somehow political limitations of eIDAS 1, because precisely this is one of the big changes. The idea with eIDAS 2 is that member states will be mandated to introduce at least a specific type of eID means, which is the European Digital Identity model. So this is the point where we agree. Then I have lots of points where I'm not necessarily in agreement. Of course, generally we agree, but there are a lot of potential discussions we need to have regarding the eIDAS 2 technological approach. I've of course noticed that you say DLT lacks main properties, or the main properties required for supporting transaction to regulated environments. This is true. But of course, this is something which is not inherent to this technology. So I remember many years ago, before even the European Signature Directive back in 1999, then it was PKI, the technology that lacked the necessary capabilities to be trustworthy. You had legislation in Germany, there was legislation in Italy, some proposed legislation in Spain, but we didn't have any regulation that mandated the properties that were to be required to this technology to be trustworthy, and now we have. So I believe that in the future, thanks precisely to, and you've mentioned this, the fact that the eIDAS 2 regulation is finally to regulate DLTs as to services, I believe that in this case, in few years, we will be saying that we have DLTs that have the properties that are required to support trustworthy transactions. So in this sense, I believe that, of course, perhaps today it would be a bad idea to use some DLT approaches in support of electronic ID means. And in the case of people dealing with metaverse monsters or potential monsters we can have, this is important because if you have technology which is not good, maybe you can be cheated and maybe you could be extracted more information, and this is a problem. But of course, if we regulate this properly, we can have trustworthy DLTs supporting some, offering some support from functions that are embedded in the eID systems. For instance, the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, which you know, uses DLT for supporting the management of trust chains. In this case, this is a completely trustworthy function. It is as trustworthy as using trusted lists or as using attestations in federations, because the technological capabilities and the cryptographic capabilities and type of proof are the same. So in this sense, for instance, I can see no problem to use this. But of course, this is far from saying that a DLT is supporting completely, or it is even more a kind of electronic ID means, which is not. And I don't believe it is the European technological approach. So my point here is that we should be technologically neutral when it comes to the eIDAS 2, and precisely not prevent any technology to be used in the future, specifically because we have an LSP, which is to pilot the European Digital Identity Wallet on top of the EPSI capabilities. In any case, coming back to one of our classical discussions, you've not mentioned SSI, but somehow when we discuss about DLTs, it is in the air. Probably this is simply to say that probably in your paper you should take a kind of position whether the eIDAS 2 is to be considered an SSI approach or not. I believe that if you are strict, probably the answer is no. Maybe if we have something that we can call an SSI approach in the European Union, it's not the purest approach. And I agree with this. So I don't believe that the purest approach, where do you have any dependency on states, is not viable, because at the end of the day, then we don't have any warranty. But this is precisely the point. So I still think we should be working specifically from the academia and from the professionals that are involved in this area in trying to define what SSI or decentralized identity management means, because somehow in the eIDAS 2 proposal you can see the main properties for this new technological approach, which is different from identity federations, and of course very different from silo identities approach. In this sense, I believe that your paper can contribute a lot if you go deeper into that line to try to help building this European SSI concept, which is something I believe we are ready to accept. Some technical comments. You say things like DIDs are not currently included in the architecture reference framework. This might be formally true, but depending on the type of proof you use in the wallet, and this is perfectly aligned with the RIF, of course you can use DIDs. So the fact that a DID is not mentioned, it does not mean it is not possible to do that. This is interesting because at the end of the day, we're putting the focus on a very specific approach, which is, by the way, very tailored for the member state needs, and it is quite experimental in some cases. So the only thing which today can be considered mature in all this story is, of course, the MDL format, the MDoc format, which is used to be used for issuing the first versions of the wallet and the first version of the credentials, which are mobile driving licenses. The rest of the story is quite experimental. Things as SDJ are completely new. They are not even standards, and I cannot anything but be surprised why we are saying that SDJ is fine while we have other technologies that are even more mature, and then we try to dismiss and not to include in the RIF. I believe that, again, your paper should be neutral from that perspective and try to build on top of what the discussion is right now in this fora, but still to look at the fact that the citizens should be able to use different technologies, because otherwise we face the risk of blocking citizens too much into the hands of member states. And this is something the European Parliament has criticized in their position. They have quarreled a lot with the Council during the trialogues to get a more open view on the identity approach. So this is fine. This is fine. We of course we are building something new. We have the view of the member states, which is very, very strict, very limitative. They want very specific instruments to be there. They want these instruments to be like the old instruments were. So they want this new eID approach to be the same as the old eID approach. And this is something I can understand, but we must not forget that citizens should have the right to use other types of technologies. This is interesting because at the end of the day, the RAF document, which you know, offers a very flexible approach, defining type 1 versus type 2 attestations or configurations. So we can leave member states with type 1 configurations, while at the same time we can explore with type 2 attestations, precisely in the spaces you are looking at in your paper. So when I look at the connection between the digital life of the citizen and the metaverse, I can see that there are two different scenarios. One scenario for specific types of operations or transactions, like probably onboarding, could be, of course, as you have suggested, be linked to type 1, very strict, very limited types of credentials. But on the other side, I believe that once you have been onboarded, enrolled in the metaverse, you should have the right to create derived identities based in type 2, where you can then put other technical possibilities that will provide you with enhanced privacy. For instance, when it comes to selective disclosure, this is a concept which has not been still defined properly anywhere. The view that member states are currently having on selective disclosure based on SDJ is too limitative, in my opinion. In this case, we cannot say properly that there is any kind of right of the citizen to selectively disclose the data they want. But what we're going to see, and this is the discussion we already are having in one LSP, we are going to see member states deciding the subsets of attributes you can disclose. This is a quite different view of selective disclosure than the one some people would like to have in the metaverse. In the metaverse, I should be able to disclose any data I want, not be subject to the previous definition by the third party. This is one potential issue I suggest you to explore. The other one, I'm finishing right now. The other one is ZKPs. Zero-knowledge proofs are very good. They are very interesting. They are brilliant. Problem is that they are not regulated in the eIDAS. The eIDAS can be a good basis for starting a potential regulation on ZKP, but we don't have it. And the reason we are not having this is because the eIDAS 1 and the eIDAS 2 approach is a service approach. So you have a provider of a service. In ZKPs, you should be having a product approach because no one is creating a ZKP on your behalf. It is your product. In this case, there is right now no space, as I see it, in the EU ID wallet for plugging in any software for ZKP. But this would be very interesting for the metaverse. So in this case, probably having this flexible approach to type 2 credentials, where you can plug experimental crypto, experimental mechanisms, even additional software, could be a way to have this flexible approach. While you still have very strong foundational civil identities you can selectively disclose for onboarding and rolling a metaverse, you still have the possibility of creating completely different identities using the same infrastructure, and then having the full benefit of the EU wallet. Not only the member states' vision, which right now is more around the complete and strict definition of type, very, very specific type 1 credentials, but of any other technology approach we might use. Finally, my final remark is that in this sense, I truly believe that an eIDAS 2 approach really oriented to a decentralized eID is a real opportunity to have a safe metaverse experience. And I believe we really do need this. But at the same time, I see that there is a risk that eIDAS 2 eIDs become something similar to recurrent eIDs, as I already explained. And my fear is that if this is the case and we are focused only on this type of approach, this won't fulfill the EU citizens' expectation. So I only have to congratulate for your work, and I suggest you to include this and any other topics you consider in the full version of the paper. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Nacho. It wasn't planned to be a counter presentation, but merely a
Sorry.
So, Steffen, I hope you found Nacho's challenging, as always, comments useful. Anyway, you will have the opportunity to address them later on. So we already have one question in the chat. Thank you, Beatriz. Please don't hesitate to write there your comments and questions. And Monica, it's now your turn to discuss Steffen's paper. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for the presentation. I would like just to share some slides just to focus the attention on the metaverse. So my comment is oriented to understand if the presented solution is quite mature or in principle is good for really the extended reality. Starting from the idea that inside of extended reality, we found a strong integration of physical and non-physical entities. And I have a suspect that the regulation eIDAS started on the principle to regulate e-services, e-government services, first of all, enlarged to the private sector, but not fitted to the vision to integrate any kind of agents, also not human being agents, like artificial intelligence agents, or sensor or other devices that could be shared between different identity. So in the metaverse, I see a new component that multiple elements, physical, non-physical, artificial agents are combining and integrated in the virtual environment in an equal way. And the distinction time to time are not so strong. So in my opinion, this interesting paper should investigate also how to integrate the relationship of interaction between sensor or other agents that are not physical. So this is a new scenario that we need to take in consideration, also because Tim Berners-Lee already suggested this way to have a unique identifier for each element in the infosphere, not limited to the human being, obviously with different level of legality, different level of proof, but this is a real topic that we needed to address if you wanted to move inside of a metaverse. The second point is that we are talking about digital identity, but inside of a metaverse, we have a constellation of important topics on the legal point of view. You can see I tried to list, but there is one very peculiar, the neuro rights. Neuro rights means that the embodiment of the motion and the action inside of a metaverse can capture our intentionality of the mental status and more rather than our identity like we have thought since now. So if the digital identity was created in a regulation eIDAS in the sense of authentication of a digital and electronic identification for services, now we are in the status to have more elements inside of a metaverse to regulate, more attributes, in other words, more characteristics that should be tackled inside of the label of digital identity and not taken consideration at all by the scenario of the European wallet. So this is one my comment. So if we would like to start now to be ready for the metaverse, probably we are now approaching a old idea good for 5 years ago and not now, and or to need to be updated to this situation that is more complex rather than the name and surname of the age that are characteristic of my professional and my credentials. but we have more characteristics to manage in this scenario. Another point is the minors, and there is a great occasion in this new wallet to taking care seriously the problem of minors, and so to have a good management of identity of the minors especially in the infosphere and especially in the metaverse. And the human rights in the respect of not only of the privacy and security, but also of the human rights, digital human rights, and to avoid the super surveillance using other instruments. Which kind of other instrument can affect this scenario of digital identity and entering deep of the super surveillance? So new dark verse patterns are possible, noticing and detecting the behaviors and the mental behaviors and the embodiment of the avatar. And so the authentication of identity should take in consideration also these new aspects and also social issues that can be detected. And this is a very important new document released by the European Parliament concerning the metaverse. Is from June of this year, and there is a part dedicated especially of the identification of the people and how the metaverse through the big companies or in general the instrument available on the metaverse are capable to detect identity also beyond the general declaration or the voluntary declaration of the identity. So the suspect is that we need to make some experiments and to test also in this environment in concrete and to stress this system and to monitor and measure if it is capable to avoid this kind of risk, also to re-identification of some information not disclosed by the wallet but detected in other way, or the opposite, if we have characteristic exchanged some credential and disclosed through the wallet in some services, if this is sure that are not detected by others instrument inside of the metaverse. And this is a mix of, that I say, the privacy issue, but also mental privacy. So a new emerging topic, narrow rights and mental privacy, or not profiling the emotion and the movement and the embodiment, especially using avatar. And so this is a kind of topics that we needed to detect and to test in this scenario. So the challenges are many, and the author of the paper, Steffen, already mentioned some of them. But the suspect is also that the European digital wallet creates something very good for cross-border services in the government inside of the Europe landscape, but not so much internationally accepted. So there is a risk to have isolation from the rest of the environment. Already the previous speaker mentioned that also the neutrality of the technology is a very important issue. So the risk is to have a one framework not integrated internationally and not accepted. Another point is this valid under legal point of view also outside of Europe? What is the jurisdiction validity, and how to integrate these wallet with the big tech methods or DLT, non-certified? And there is not a risk to have something good inside of the wallet, but a large other services outside and not under control. And again, what about the integration between physical and non-physical entities like agents, artificial intelligence agents? And also it is very important, in my opinion, to integrate these in the light also of Data Act and Data Digital Act, and also the other regulation, because also the collection of the data is interesting to understand what is the integration with the intermediary services data actors that are coming in the market thanks to the Data Governance Act and the Data Act. So and also that I say before, the motion is a new element that we are now present in the metaverse. So the avatar movement is a reflection of our physical movement mediated by devices, and which kind of devices. So this is create something of a mid layer to take in consideration. Last but not least, in the past, especially in many countries, and Italy for sure, the digital identity instrument tools didn't manage so well the minors, first of all, but also the delegation of someone else, like the parent or the grandmother. And this is a good occasion to include inside of a mechanism natively, not in the service layer, but natively inside of a wallet, something that is good for managing the delegation in order to expose the delegation to the services and not to duplicate in each services this kind of delegation. So this is my opinion is very important. And just some comments, and I leave the floor to the author for the answer.
Thank you very much, Monica, for your input and for sure for the challenges you have posed. And one of them is directly related to Beatrice's question, so we will have to come back about it afterwards. Particularly, Monica, thank you for the EU Parliament report. The risk of re-identification that it stresses seems to be particularly relevant. I hope that the eIDAS 2 digital wallet may increase Metaverse users' privacy, but as you have just pointed out, it must be assumed that data protection in this scenario is fully GDPR compliant. So, Steffen, the moment to discuss with Nachio's and Monica's remark has now finally arrived. Thank you very much for your kind patience, and please feel free to answer all of them, just a few, or only the ones that you consider the most relevant.
Let's start with the ethics subject. Yes, this is something which has to be, which should be discussed a bit further, especially if we use the type 2 configuration, which is not so clearly defined in the ERF, and I'm pretty sure it won't be so clearly defined. So it's a bit like you can do anything. It's, I know, Nacho, it's not so hard to do anything, but it's not so clearly defined and strongly regulated, can say, like the type 1. But if we don't have a clear and hardly defined technical playing field, there is also a bit more the risk for surveillance and security risks, etc., as Monica mentioned. So if I go away from certified trust services or from PIDs in the wallet, which may not come from a member state or not come from a certified provider, I will have this risk on security. And if I provide it to a relying party which is not registered, I can't in all cases be sure it's really the relying party seems to be, or do I deliver identity data to a non-proven verifier? And we may run in the same security issue which we had in Germany with the Rwandan ID wallet fail. So this is something we have to keep in mind. So this would be more a reasonable justification why to stay with type 1 and not going to type 2 approach in this case. But yes, it should be discussed a bit further in the paper. Concerning the international acceptance, it leads me a bit to the discussion from Nacho. My recommendation in this case would be a bit, or my answer we would discuss would be a bit, I expect that type 1 is feasible to be used also for private use cases like payment, like digital travel, for example, because in this case, in travel, we need a wallet which is accepted worldwide, which means I have to integrate the standards, maybe a DTC ICAO standard given by IATA, which is already used worldwide. Otherwise, I can't use it for digital travel, and if the people have to use for their boarding passes still their Apple Wallet, no, they won't use the digital wallet. Why? Yeah, because the alternative is much better. So this would be, from my perspective, more a requirement for type 1 to be as feasible as possible for as many use cases as possible, that I don't need type 2 in this case. So to achieve this acceptance worldwide, it's a bit to integrate worldwide standards in this subject, which means at the end of the day, please not only MDoc and ISO MDL, but also SDJ, W3C, Wi-Fi credentials, etc. Especially W3C data model is already used for certain wallets worldwide. Concerning the DRT subject, yes, DRT might be, is hopefully able to be used for records management and high regulated industries. I'm pretty sure that our common work in CEN, ETSI, and ISO is really supporting this subject. And to answer the question in the chat, I expect that that it was included in the eIDAS 2 regulation, that DRT is already there. And it's the need to be used for regulated cases, but in this case I have to regulate it. And if we then have mandatory implementing acts, the standards have to be created and mentioned by the implementing act. So I create a need for this standard, and we can't wait again 5 years to have no standards. So this is what I think it's the reason why they included eIDAS, it in eIDAS 2. Concerning the SSI approach, I'm pretty sure I will go forward based on our common paper. I just put the link in the chat on SSI and the eIDAS, which we both of us published 2 years ago. To go a little bit further based on this subject, maybe what has been changed in the last 2 years, and something a bit on the EPSI. Yes, I expect from EPSI that it will be this trustworthy DRT and infrastructure, the secure infrastructure, because otherwise I don't see any future for EPSI. Why should I use EPSI if especially EPSI provided by the member states with nodes run by member states is not able to be used for highly regulated cases? In this case, I don't need EPSI. So the only chance for EPSI is to fulfill those requirements. And as long as the trust chains in EPSI fulfill the requirements from ETSI 19612, why not use them as trust list? As long as they fulfill the standards, I think nobody would say no. So yes, I will. Thanks for these recommendations to go a bit deeper in the subjects. Interesting discussion. And same for SDJ. It's a bit my requirement on the. I think I'm not the only one. The requirements from the LSPs, and it's not only one LSP working on this subject, as you may know. So we work together in EABC and TC4U in this case to create a feasible AIF. So this would be a bit my recommendation on this subject. If we need type 2, that the EU digital wallet is usable outside government, the EU digital wallet won't have a future. This is a bit my impression in this subject. And concerning the question on big tech, Monica, we know that all of us know that there's the possibility for the member states to certify private wallets. And now we expect a member state which certifies the Apple Wallet as their EU digital wallet. They issues it, and they make it possible for any EU citizen to use this wallet, which is legally possible. This question, we won't have the issue for the acceptance for the wallet worldwide. And this is, I'm pretty sure, there are some chances. But this integration in big tech, yes, it should be discussed further, because there is a risk if we integrate it in big tech, we will have this ethic and surveillance subject. And this we should discuss further, especially also what you mentioned with this, how it relates to sensors, agents, and machines, etc. This lets me also a bit to the question, is an edge wallet enough or sufficient? Or do we need something like a cloud wallet on this subjects? So I only can say thanks a lot for this, for the recommendations, which are really exciting, and it gives me a really good motivation just to finalize this paper, and just to share maybe also some versions of the paper with you before it's finally published, just to get your feedback. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Steffen. I think we have time enough for a second round if Nacho or Monica wants to say anything else. Otherwise, I will pose the questions.
No, the question is if, in your opinion, the rest of the market outside of Europe will accept these. So it's obviously a great question. But I would like to understand from your opinion if we can wish in the Bruxelles effect, like we had in the GDPR, or if we stay isolated, let me say, in a great European land or cross-border services, but not integrated well with the rest of the technicalities. What is your vision in this?
My vision is a bit that I just trust in this case a bit in the LSPs, because we have some LSPs focusing on payment and digital travel. Payment will only work if it's usable worldwide. If I have to use, for example, my EU digital wallet with the payment token from Visa, and I can only use it in the European Union, and if I go to Korea, I need another token, I would say, okay, I just move to Google because there I don't need it. I can use it worldwide. This means if we want to ensure that the wallet is usable worldwide, we should make it feasible for use cases which are relevant worldwide. This means B2B use cases, supply chain, something like product pass, something like this, payment, travel. Because in this case, we have to implement the worldwide standards on payment, on travel, and on organizational identity, for example, like the VLEI from Gleif, which are already accepted worldwide. And in this case, we will achieve also the acceptance of the wallet worldwide. And what I can say from my ISA groups is the world is watching us. They are watching Europe because we are the first big economy in the world regulating decentralized identity management. And they will adopt what works, and they will make better what won't work. So this is a bit also the background where I expect that they will accept it as long as we integrate existing solutions, protocols, formats, tokens, from payment, from travel, from supply chain subjects, from, for example, big tech, metaverse, etc. Otherwise, if we create our own world, it won't work. This is so the requirement is integrate worldwide standards, worldwide solutions on use cases, which are relevant worldwide. And this might be also the diploma, which is especially for our Spanish colleagues an interesting subject. So where we also have worldwide standards.
If I may, I mean, of course, I agree with what Steffen is saying, but at the end of the day, some of these global standards do not fulfill the properties and requirements we want to have under eIDAS 2. So this is one kind of irony of the system. So MDL today doesn't provide for revocation. When you want to put revocation in MDL, you lose privacy completely. And when I say that it does not provide revocation, I'm citing the ISO standard. So it is not there. In fact, in ISO IEC SC 17, they are working right now, and I'm part of that standardization committee. I'm not active part, but I'm there. And they are right now starting to think on how to do that. And the technical proposals I've seen are not feasible, for instance, in the full off-chain scenario. In the University of Murcia, a few years ago, we did with Logati as well, an Horizon 2020 project called Olympus to try to provide for MDL, which is one of the type 1 data formats proposed in the IRF. We tried, as I was saying, to have the possibility of sharing attributes and sharing revocation information in a privacy enhancing way. And we end up by implementing something very similar to the blockchain-based approach, which is something we need to reflect upon. Because at the end of the day, it is completely true that if you want your passport to be accepted everywhere, you need to abide to that standard. But nonetheless, it is true as well that if you want to use the same infrastructure for having identity when you are establishing a relationship with a metaverse or with a set of metaverses which are interconnected, then there is no standard to abide by. It's something you need to build. You can reuse whatever you have, but still we need to put something if we really want to go further the federation approach, which is the only approach we currently have in the standards. And there is a lot of standardization activity around this. I believe that if the RAF could be a tool to take what the best we already have, but to propose additional mechanisms as well. And right now, this is a discussion I believe we need to have. So it is not just that we use international standards and that are accepted. That's fine, but it is not the only thing we need to do. So I believe that we can have both of best of both worlds if we look at the full use cases. And today we are discussing about metaverses, which are highly regulated, but only for the onboarding of users. So once you have been enrolled and you have the control over your derived identities, then I don't see that much importance in using type 1 very highly secure credentials for anything. So
depends on
it's
the
something that should be
transaction, I
studied.
think. It depends a bit on the transaction. If you buy something in the metaverse for 20 euros, yes, you don't need type 1. If you buy your virtual Picasso and you want to pay 200,000 euros in the metaverse, maybe you want to have type 1 because if you don't get it, you might want to know who tried to sell it to you and want to go to a court just to get your virtual Picasso. So it depends a bit on the use case.
That's the point.
Concerning the privacy, let me be a little bit the advocate of the devil in this case. For privacy, we have the GDPR. And if we everything, as long as it's compliant to GDPR, we don't have to discuss about privacy. And if the revocation in existing identities was to compliant to GDPR, we don't have to set higher standards for the new eIDAS 2. Because at the end of the day, the question is, who pays for this higher level of privacy? And if the user say, I don't want to pay for it, I use my Apple Wallet, I go to buy a car and use my Apple, I go to buy something and I use my Apple Wallet. I go outside, I use everywhere my Google Wallet. This is the reality, which we have to accept. And if we say, yes, we have a higher level of privacy, but this leads to usability where the user have to do 2, 3, or 1 clicks more, then on the Apple Wallet, the answer is the user will use its Apple Wallet. And we won't have a chance with our judicial wallet. This means, from my perspective, as long as it's compliant to GDPR, there is no need for a higher level of privacy as long as we don't have somebody who's paying for this. And if nobody says, I just pay for it, there is no reason for this higher level of privacy. I know from a scientific point of view, I fully agree. From a usability, from a business scenario point of view, I disagree, because the reality is the people discuss in a webinar on privacy. Then they go outside and they use their Apple Wallet, they use their Google Wallet, they go on Facebook, they go everywhere, and they don't care about. And we have to address this reality. If we don't keep this reality in mind, and if we don't find a solution which is from the usability on the same level like Apple and Google, the digital wallet won't be successful.
Okay, I think it's the time for the questions in the chat room. The first one by Beatriz Serrano. She wants to know which private entities are obliged to accept the European ID wallet. This question is related to the last issue raised by Steffen. And only European companies or companies from third countries as well? Yeah, you have already answered as a first version, but just in case anyone else wants to deal with that.
I just repeat what I wrote in the chat. Any company which is part of the critical infrastructure, this is, for example, most of the banks, the complete healthcare sector. It's also some manufacturing companies, for example, if they run a harbor or in a transportation sector, etc. This is affected, and any party which provides a market-leading platform, or which is market-leading platform provider like Google, Apple, Facebook. This is typically affected by the obligation to accept the EU digital wallet. Please, Nacho, correct me if I'm wrong.
It's fine.
There's a second one about blockchain, and Paul Polanski wonders why this technology was chosen to be included in the eIDAS 2 regulation if there are no security standards concerning this technology. Will the whole framework be dependent on Ethereum?
Yeah, I think the last question goes a little bit to EPSI. If EPSI is still focusing on Hyperledger Besu or other protocols, I think this is something which is under discussion in in EPSI concerning blockchain. Like I said, my impression is a bit that it was included in the eIDAS 2 because the IT is already there and we want to use it for high regulated environments. And for this case, it has to be regulated. And if it's a QTSP and we have mandatory implementing acts, there is the need to create the standards or the missing standards I mentioned and to reference them by the implementing acts. And so we achieve what I just said a bit, this trustworthy DIT infrastructure. And if it's then based on Ethereum or on for identities on Hyperledger Indy or every stack, or if it's then don't know IOTA or whatever, I think this does not depend on the protocol. It depends on the whole infrastructure, which includes the consensus algorithm, which includes subjects like crypto stability, like crypto agility, like measures against cybersecurity, attacks, sustainability, business continuity management, etc., like for the other QTSP. So, long story short, I expect it was included that we achieve what currently nobody achieved in the world, a trustworthy DIT infrastructure with proven security. Nacho, please correct me if you have another opinion on the subject.
No, I quite agree, because I've been member of the EPSI team of in fact DG, working for DG Connect, who actually wrote the proposal. I quite concur with your in fact the reason, the main reason was the fact that we didn't have a legal basis for operating a blockchain, and we've had quite a couple of years working on this, but it was not really easy to define the set of rules and the rights and obligations, you know, and of course we wanted to have a legal effect. So you can see that the main reason behind regulating this is if you have a blockchain which is not based in proof of work, then you need to trust the validator nodes. And if you look at EFSI respectively, at least right now, EFSI works as a true proof of authority system in the Hyperledger SU ledger, because we have Hyperledger Fabric ledgers for other use cases. Then if you look at this, you understand that you need to rely on the activity of the validator nodes. And at the end of the day, a validator node has a private key. And if this private key is stolen or it is misused, then you can break the chain. So it is as you are saying, but you can go further and say you need eIDAS 2 if you want to have blockchains which are not based in proof of work. So that's the point. Yeah.
And maybe some personal remarks on this subject is German. It's very good that we have such a level, because in this case we get QTSP on this and we get mandatory standards. And then we can convince our national cybersecurity authority just to accept DRT, not only for high regulated cases, but also for as an infrastructure for decentralized identity management, because their justification why they don't accept it is because we don't have those standards. So
I know.
This is, as German, it's a personal remark and a personal remark on DRT. So naturally we are working in two projects that work on this subject just as often.
So unless Monica wants to add anything, the webinar is now finished. Steffen, Monica, and Nacho, thank you very much for your generosity in sharing your knowledge, and also for your courage in openly raising your opinion on science, open and complex issues. Let me borrow Mario's words in the chat room. There are still a lot of risks, but the solution must be created, better than nothing. Before leaving, I would like to give the floor to Professor Aurelio López Tarruella, who will provide us with very useful information about the next webinar organized by the chair.
Yes, thanks a lot, Julian. First of all, I would like to thank the participants in the webinar. It was an excellent complement to the previous webinars. In both of them we discussed avatars and digital identity in the metaverse. And thanks, Julian, because in the end of the day, this was a collaboration between the chair of the metaverse and the chair of identity and digital rights of the Universidad de Murcia. There is still one activity on behalf of the chair of the metaverse for next week, that again is a collaboration with another chair, in this case of the University of Alicante. It will be held in Spanish next Monday, and it relates to the concept of property, transmission, and inheritance of digital assets. We invite you, in particular Spanish speakers in the audience, to join us next Monday. For the rest, we are preparing more webinars and more activities after the summer break about many issues like personal data protection, digital marketplaces, content moderation in the metaverse. But for now, we will leave the thrill there, and you will have plenty of information after the summer break in September. Again, thanks a lot, and I hope that Steffen in particular, you have obtained plenty of information to finish your paper that hopefully we will see it published right after the summer. Thanks a lot, and have a great summer, everyone in the audience. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you to you. Thank you to all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.